Hi, I'm Victoria. Today we're going to go through a quick tutorial on downward facing dog and some key things to look at when you come up into the posture. So when you're ready, roll out your mat and let's get started. Before we come into downward facing dog, I want you to take a seat, so either kneeling or cross-legged, whatever feels comfortable, just for a minute, and bring your hands to your ribs. And so I want you to take a big, deep inhale here through your nose. And as you inhale, feel your ribs expand out into your hands. And then without forcing the breath out, just open your mouth and exhale. Let the breath just flow out naturally. And as you do so, feel the ribs contract together. And then once you release your breath passively, then squeeze the rest of the breath out of your lungs by pressing your front body, your belly button, toward your lower back. With your hands on your ribs, I want you to feel how your core tenses up and you get some slight core engagement when you do that. So remember that, the ribs that bring together and the core slightly turning on. That's what we want to find in our downward facing dog. So let's come onto all fours in tabletop position here. And find your proper stacking. So look at your hands, spread your fingers out wide, stack your shoulders directly over your wrists, and parallel your wrist creases towards the top of your mat. And then take a glance at your knees. Make sure your hips are directly over your knees and your knees are hip width distance apart. Now I'm going to turn to you just so I can demonstrate what we're going to talk about. I want to talk about the arms in our downward facing dog. So I want you to look at the elbow creases, the eyes of your elbows right now. And if we're not actively thinking about it, our elbow creases maybe naturally want to roll in and face each other. So I want you to think about countering that by wrapping your whole entire arm out towards the edges of your mat. So you're kind of rotating your arm inside of the shoulder socket and feel like you're reaching the elbow creases towards the front of your mat. And when you do that, notice if weight is kind of rolling towards the pinky edges of your hands. And I want you to counter that by pressing down even more between your pointer finger and your thumb. And when you do that, perhaps your elbow creases are now reaching at an angle. So not completely facing each other, not completely facing forward, but at a 45-degree angle. And that's kind of what we want to find in our downward facing dog. So then in our tabletop position, just for a moment, feel your shoulders and your heart just collapse down towards your mat. So without really activating the shoulders or the chest, just feel a sinking and a caving of the upper back. And now let's find the opposite of that. So press your hands down and press your chest away from your mat. Feel a rounding in your upper back and your shoulder blades splitting apart. And now let's find that in-between phase. So not completely collapsing, not completely pushing away, but an in-between phase where we can find engagement in the shoulders and that zippering of the ribs that we found a couple moments ago when we exhaled the breath out. And then from here, tuck your toes back behind you and press your palms down, begin to lift your hips up and then back. And feel like you're aiming your tailbone towards the wall behind you, right where the wall and the ceiling meet. And then just let your head go. So let gravity take over. Shake your head out yes and no, just to make sure you're not holding any tension in your neck or shoulders. Maybe your gaze naturally comes towards your toes. And then find some movement here. So maybe bend the knees, sway the hips. If your glutes are feeling really stretched right here, then consider walking your feet wider than hip width distance towards the edges of your mat. And if your hamstrings or calves are feeling really tense, then bend in your knees as much as you need to. And once you're in your downward facing dog, just kind of walk yourself through, starting with your hands. Press your hands down into your mat to feel like you're lifting up and away. And then feel that rotation in your arms towards the edges of your mat. Feel your ribs zippering together like we did when we exhaled. And then find your heels completely hidden behind your toes, so your toes point straight forward. And then you take a couple of breaths here. And then when you're ready, gently bend your knees and come back down and take a rest. A couple of quick tips for your downward facing dog. If you come into your downward facing dog and you really feel like there's a lot of pressure in your wrists and your shoulders, then that might mean that you're not engaging your hands and your arms enough, so that gravity is really just kind of pulling your body weight down onto your joints. So if that's you, then I want you to think about pressing your hands down, especially your fingers down, and feel like you're really lifting away from your mat and trying to shift more weight from your hands and your shoulders into your feet. If you feel like your hamstrings and your calves are feeling a little tight, then put a big bend in your knees as much as you need to. You want to feel like your heels are reaching towards the mat, but they don't have to be completely on your mat. I just want you to feel like you're lengthening from your tailbone all the way down to your heels. And if that means putting a bend in your knees, then go ahead and do so. And one last thing, if downward facing dog ever feels like it's a lot of work or it doesn't really feel good in your body, then you can always come into tabletop position and use this posture as an alternative to downward facing dog. And over time, as you practice downward facing dog, you might feel that you're engaging the muscles and you feel a little more ease when you come into that shape. So I hope this was helpful for you, give you some things to think about when you come into your downward facing dog. Please comment below if you have any questions and I will get back to you.